My name is Megan Carter. I'm 32 years old, and the moment my sister smirked across the dinner table and said I wasn't a real soldier, I knew that night was going to split my family right down the middle. She said it loudly, casually, like humiliation was part of the meal. According to her, I wasn't serving my country. I was hiding in air conditioning, pushing papers, pretending my clearance made me important. My mother gave that thin, uncomfortable laugh people use when they want cruelty to sound like a joke. My father lowered his eyes to his plate, and I sat there, feeling the old burn rise in my chest, the same one I'd swallowed for years every time someone decided that if my service wasn't visible, it didn't count. I could have ignored it. I almost did. But then a man stepped into the room, an old friend of hers, the kind of man whose posture told you he had seen real violence and survived it. He glanced toward me at the exact wrong moment, just as I opened my wallet and my badge became visible for half a second. What happened to his face after that still haunts me. He didn't laugh. He didn't blink. He just froze, all the color draining out of him like he had seen a ghost wearing my name. And in that instant, I realized my sister had no idea who she was mocking in front of everyone. She thought she was embarrassing me. She had no clue she was about to drag a buried truth into the open, one that could destroy her pride, ruin the image she worshipped, and make her beg for a kind of forgiveness I was no longer sure I wanted to give. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I stood up from that table, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The dinner had started like every other forced family gathering in our house. Too much food, too much history, and too many people pretending old wounds had healed just because they were covered by tablecloths and polite smiles. I had arrived straight from base, exhausted, still carrying the mental weight of a week I couldn't talk about. And from the moment I walked in, I knew my sister had already decided I was going to be her entertainment for the night. She had always been like that when we were younger, charming in public, cutting in private. But adulthood had only made her cruelty more polished. She no longer snapped or screamed. She smiled. She joked. She made everyone laugh first, then acted confused when I didn't enjoy being the punchline. That night, she had an audience, and she used it. She leaned back in her chair, twirling her glass between two fingers, and said, "Let's be honest. Megan isn't the kind of military people picture when they say the word soldier." A few people chuckled before she continued, warmer now that she had momentum. "She works indoors, never talks about what she does, acts mysterious, and somehow expects everyone to treat it like some huge heroic burden." She looked around the table like she was inviting agreement, and because people are cowards when mockery wears perfume, nobody stopped her. I felt the pressure building behind my ribs, but I kept my face neutral. That had become a survival skill. In my line of work, reaction could be dangerous. At that table, reaction only gave her more to feed on. So I reached for my water, kept my breathing even, and reminded myself that not every battle was worth fighting. But the truth was, this one had been building for years. Every holiday, every reunion, every backhanded comment about me having the easy version of service. Every time she praised men in uniform as if they were carved from myth, while dismissing women like me because our contribution didn't fit her fantasy of heroism. She didn't know what my work had cost me. She didn't know how many nights I had gone without sleep because one bad assessment, one delayed signal, one missed pattern could mean names on a casualty list by morning. She didn't know how many operations were won before the first boot hit the ground, and she definitely didn't know that the man she had invited tonight, the one she treated like a trophy from her social circle, was connected to one of the ugliest classified moments of my career. When he entered, she brightened instantly, proud to have him there, proud of the symbolism. To her, he represented the kind of warrior she respected, visible, decorated, easy to admire. She introduced him to the room with the kind of reverence she had never once used for me. And then, while I reached into my wallet to pull out the folded note my father had asked me to bring from the kitchen counter, my badge flashed into view. His eyes landed on it. The room kept breathing, talking, laughing. But he didn't. His face locked. His shoulders stiffened. His hand stopped halfway to the chair. I noticed it immediately because trained people notice shifts before words. My sister saw it too, but she misread it as admiration, and that was the beginning of her collapse. I remember thinking, not with satisfaction yet, but with cold clarity, you should have let me finish dinner in peace, because if he recognizes that badge, and if he says what I think he might say, then tonight won't be about your jokes anymore. It will be about what really happened, and you are not ready for that truth. At first, nobody else understood the change in the room. My mother was still trying to smooth things over with nervous little comments. My father still wearing that tired silence that always meant he knew more than he wanted to admit, and my sister was still smiling with that bright, poisonous confidence of someone who had never faced consequences severe enough to make her humble. She stood and crossed the room to greet her friend, touching his arm like she owned the moment. "Perfect timing," she said. "You can settle something for us. Megan's being dramatic because I told her the truth. She's not exactly out there doing what you used to do." She laughed softly, expecting him to laugh too. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were still on me, not casually, not curiously, carefully, as if he were rerunning a memory and trying to decide whether it belonged to the woman sitting at this table. I could feel everyone beginning to notice the silence, and that was when the air changed. He asked me a question, quiet enough that only the people closest heard it at first. "Where did you get that badge?" For 1 second, the whole room seemed to tilt. I knew exactly why he was asking. That badge was not something people noticed unless they knew what it signified. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't cinematic. But to the right people, it was unmistakable. I held his gaze and answered with the simplest truth I could afford in a room full of civilians. I earned it. Something in his expression tightened. My sister tried to laugh it off again, but there was a crack in it now. "Oh my God, don't tell me you're taking her mysterious desk act seriously." Still, he didn't respond to her. He took one step closer to the table and asked me a second question, this time with a level of respect I had not received in that house in years. "Were you attached to Falcon Echo during the Eastern Corridor recovery?" My mother frowned. My father looked up for the first time all evening, and my sister's smile disappeared completely because even she could hear that this was no longer casual. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The answer was already on my face. The former special operations man closed his eyes for the briefest moment, like someone absorbing an impact delayed by years. When he opened them again, there was no arrogance left in him, no social ease, just a raw, stunned recognition. He looked at my sister, not cruelly, not theatrically, just with disbelief, and said, "Do you have any idea who you've been mocking?" No one moved. No one even reached for a fork. The sound of the clock in the next room suddenly felt louder than the people in it. My sister went defensive immediately, because that's what insecure people do when reality threatens the version of themselves they've been performing. She folded her arms and said he was overreacting, that I had probably exaggerated my role like always, that people in support jobs loved pretending they were the reason anything important happened. She thought she could drag the moment back under her control by being louder than the truth. But he wasn't looking at her like a friend anymore. He was looking at her like a person standing carelessly on the edge of something lethal. And somewhere deep inside me, something old and restrained finally began to uncurl. Not anger exactly. Not yet. Something steadier. The kind of calm that comes when you realize the truth has arrived on its own, and all you have to do is stop protecting the people who never protected you. I had spent years carrying silence like duty, but in that moment, watching the color fade from his face while my sister still tried to joke, I knew the night had crossed a point of no return. She wanted the room to see me as small. Instead, she had brought in the one witness capable of showing them just how wrong she had always been. He pulled out his chair slowly but never sat down. "I'm going to say this once," he said, and the room obeyed him before he finished the sentence. "The only reason I am alive to stand here tonight is because somebody in intelligence caught something everyone else missed." No one interrupted. My sister tried to shift her weight and hold on to her posture, but even from across the table I could see the first signs of panic behind her eyes. He kept speaking, not in the polished tone of a storyteller, but in the flat, precise way people talk when memory is too serious to decorate. Years ago, his team had been sent into a corridor that appeared clean. The route had been reviewed. The timing had been approved. The strike probability had been marked low enough to proceed. But there had been an inconsistency buried inside a stack of raw data. Small, ugly, easy to dismiss if you were moving too fast and too eager to prove you were right. Most people would have missed it. One person didn't. One analyst pushed back against the chain, flagged the corridor, tore apart the assumptions, and kept escalating until command was forced to reevaluate the mission window. The route was changed. Hours later, the original corridor was hit. Hard. "If we had gone where we were supposed to go," he said, voice tightening for the first time, "we would have walked into a kill box." My mother covered her mouth. My father's expression changed from discomfort to dawning shock. My sister turned toward me like she was seeing a stranger where she had always assumed a weaker version of herself sat. He looked directly at her then and said the one sentence I think finally broke the illusion she had been living in. "The woman you've been calling fake is the reason some of us got to come home." She tried to fight it. Of course she did. She said that couldn't possibly be what happened, that he must be mistaken, that lots of analysts existed and he was attaching some dramatic story to the wrong person. But he wasn't guessing anymore. He asked me whether I still carried the old challenge coin from that review cycle. I said yes, because I did. I had kept it buried away for years, not out of pride, but because some things are too costly to display like trophies. I went to my bag, opened the inner zipper, and took it out. He saw it and went pale all over again. My father asked, very quietly, "Megan, was that you?" I should have felt triumphant then. Instead, I felt tired. Tired in a way that reached back through every year I had let my sister reduce me because keeping the peace seemed easier than demanding the truth. "Yes," I said, "it was me." The words landed harder than any shout could have. My sister stared at me as if the room had betrayed her personally by refusing to preserve the version of me she preferred. She tried to pivot, saying that even if I had helped once, that didn't make her wrong about what my daily job looked like. That comment would have worked on a weaker room. But now the room knew her instincts were rotten. My father asked why I had never told them. I answered honestly, because I wasn't allowed to, and because every time I tried to defend the importance of what I did, I got mocked before I could finish a sentence. No one had an answer for that. My mother started crying quietly, the kind of crying rooted in guilt more than sorrow. And my sister, still desperate, still proud, made the mistake that sealed her fate. She said, "Fine. Maybe she got lucky once. That still doesn't make her some hero." The former operator turned so sharply toward her that even she stepped back. "Lucky?" he repeated. "You think pattern analysis under pressure is luck? You think saving a team without ever being seen is luck? No. What's luck is that she bothered to care enough to fight for men who would never even know her name." He paused, glanced at me, and his expression shifted from anger to something almost ashamed. I didn't know it was you until I saw the badge, but I've carried the weight of that night for years, and hearing you mock her in this house. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. My sister's face had begun to crack, not with remorse yet, but with fear. The social balance she relied on was gone. The room no longer belonged to her. For the first time in our lives, everyone was looking at me not as the oversensitive little sister, not as the difficult woman who couldn't take a joke, but as the person who had done something real while staying silent about it. And once that kind of truth enters a family, the old hierarchy starts dying fast. What came next hurt more than the mockery ever had, because exposure has a way of dragging every old failure into the light at once. My father stood up slowly from the table, and I could tell from the look on his face that he was not only angry at my sister, he was ashamed of himself. That silence of his, the silence he had worn like neutrality for years, suddenly looked exactly like what it had always been: permission. My mother kept whispering my name under her breath, as if repeating it could erase the fact that she had laughed when I was being humiliated 10 minutes earlier. And my sister, sensing the shift but too proud to surrender, started talking faster, sharper, meaner. She said everybody was blowing this out of proportion. She said one story didn't change the fact that I acted superior all the time. She said I loved secrecy because it made people feel smaller around me. That accusation would have broken me a few years earlier, because there had once been a time when I still wanted her understanding more than I wanted justice. But by then, something in me had hardened into clarity. I looked at her and saw not a powerful person, not even a cruel one in the grand dramatic sense. I saw someone who had built her identity on being the family's golden voice, the charismatic one, the one whose opinions shaped the room. And now the room was slipping away from her, so she was clawing at anything she could reach. The former special operations man asked her a simple question: why had she invited him tonight? It seemed strange at first, but I understood what he was doing. He was tracing motive. She stammered, then said she just thought it would be nice to have an old friend around. He didn't buy it. Neither did I. She had invited him because she liked placing herself near symbols of visible bravery. She liked curating the kind of image that made her feel important by association. Men like him reflected glory she could admire. Women like me threatened it. Because if my service mattered too, then her entire private hierarchy of worth collapsed. And that was the ugly truth underneath all of it. She had never hated my job because it was boring. She hated it because it was serious, invisible, and real in a way she couldn't control. When he pressed her, asking whether she remembered telling people I was basically a government secretary in uniform, she snapped and said she'd only been saying what everyone was thinking. The room recoiled at that, because the second someone says the cruel part out loud, everyone who laughed starts hearing themselves in it. My father asked her to apologize. She refused. My mother asked her more softly. She refused again. Then my father did something I had never seen him do in my entire life. He told her to leave the table. Not to calm down. Not to take a breath. To leave. The command hit her like an insult to her identity. She stared at him in disbelief and demanded to know whether he was really taking my side over a misunderstanding. He answered with a sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. This isn't about choosing Megan over you. This is about finally refusing to reward contempt. My sister laughed once, but there was no confidence left in it. She looked around for support and found none. That was when the revenge truly began. Not because I attacked her, but because the system that had protected her arrogance finally failed. The former operator reached into his jacket pocket, took out his phone, and said there was one more thing the family deserved to know if she insisted on acting like this. I turned toward him immediately, pulse jumping. I knew there were stories buried in old operational circles, but I didn't know what he had kept. He told the room that during the aftermath review of that same mission window, it had been discovered that someone on the civilian liaison side had leaked timing information to impress a friend. Nothing formally prosecutable in the final chain, but enough loose talk to create vulnerability. My sister frowned, confused. Then he said the name of the contractor she used to date. I saw the blood leave her face in real time. She had thought that part of her past was dead and buried. Apparently it wasn't. He didn't accuse her of treason or anything theatrical. He didn't need to. He simply stated that careless bragging, careless talking, and careless ego had nearly intersected with a mission that might have ended in bodies. He said that was why people like me existed, to catch disasters created by people who loved attention more than discipline. You mock the badge because you don't understand what secrecy protects, he said. That ignorance isn't harmless, it never was. My father asked her whether it was true that she had talked loosely years ago about military movement through that contractor. She said it had been nothing, just vague conversation, just immature stupidity, just social chatter. But the word just is useless when consequences are large enough. My mother looked like she might be sick, and I sat there, perfectly still, feeling the balance of years begin to shift. Not because I had exposed her, but because truth had finally stopped sparing her. By then, the room no longer felt like a family dinner. It felt like the slow, merciless unmasking of a person who had always believed charm could outvote accountability. The food was still on the table, the glasses were still half full, the lights were still warm, but none of it looked normal anymore. Everything had shifted. My sister kept trying to shrink what she had done with language, just joking, just talking, just trying to keep things light, just making conversation, just teasing, but every smaller word she chose only made her look worse. There is something uniquely repulsive about people who treat damage as harmless as long as they didn't intend to be caught causing it. She kept reaching for softer labels, as if renaming cruelty could somehow bleach the stain out of it. But the room had changed too much for that to work now. My father asked her whether she had any idea how often she had humiliated me in public. Not just tonight, but over the years. She tried to say I was too sensitive, that I always took things personally, that I never understood her sense of humor. He cut her off before she could finish. My mother asked how many times she had repeated private information about my work just to seem interesting in front of friends, how many little details she had packaged into gossip because it made her feel connected to something important. She denied specifics, admitted tone, minimized everything else. It was all half confession, half self-defense, the language of someone desperate to reduce guilt without actually owning it. The former operator stayed quiet long enough for the silence to do what confrontation sometimes cannot: make a person hear themselves clearly. And then he said that if my assessment had not overridden the compromised assumptions from that old operational cycle, men would have died following a route contaminated by arrogance, haste, and loose mouths. You keep treating service like branding, he told her. That's your problem. Megan never did. His voice was steady, but that steadiness made it even worse. There was no performance in it. No dramatic outrage, just disgust sharpened by memory. My sister's eyes filled then, but even in that moment I could tell the tears came from collapse, not conscience. She wasn't grieving what she had done to me. She was grieving the loss of control. She was grieving the fact that the room no longer belonged to her. She asked me why I had never corrected her before if I was so accomplished, as if my silence had been the real offense all along. The question was so twisted I actually laughed. Once, quietly, not from humor, but from disbelief. I tried, I said. You never wanted truth. You wanted me smaller. That landed. I saw it in the way her mouth tightened, in the way her eyes dropped for half a second before pride forced them back up again. My father sat back down heavily like a man suddenly aware of how many years he had mistaken peacekeeping for parenting. The sound of the chair against the floor felt heavier than it should have. My mother came around the table toward me, trembling, and apologized for every laugh, every silence, every time she had let mockery pass because she thought, that's just how siblings are. She said it like someone hearing the ugliness of that excuse for the first time. I accepted her apology, but not in the warm, immediate way she wanted. Some wounds do not close because the right words finally arrive late. Sometimes an apology lands like truth, not comfort. Then I turned to my sister and asked the question I should have asked years ago. What exactly did you need me to be for you to feel bigger? She had no answer. None. Not even a lie polished enough to survive the moment. Because there never is one. People who build themselves by standing on someone else usually cannot explain the architecture once the floor disappears. The former operator then did something that finished what the truth had started. In front of everyone, he said he could never remain close to someone who mocked the very kind of work that saved his life, especially while hiding her own history of careless talk and disrespect. He wasn't dramatic about it. He didn't raise his voice or make a show of leaving. He simply said he was done. No more calls, no more friendship, no more pretending her behavior was ignorance when it had become a pattern. That hit her harder than my father's anger or my mother's tears. She had always valued reflected status, and now one of the people she had used to decorate her own identity was withdrawing his respect in front of witnesses. She tried to stop him, saying he was being unfair, that he was punishing her over one bad night, that he was making a permanent decision over something temporary and emotional. He answered, "No, I'm reacting to years of who you've chosen to be." I watched that sentence go through her like a blade, and I will be honest with you. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. For years, I had been trained by family dynamics to treat my pain as inconvenient and her cruelty as normal, to keep things moving, to be the one who understood. But sitting there, watching consequence finally attach itself to her behavior, I felt something close to peace. Not joy. Revenge that matters is rarely joyful. It is clarifying. It restores proportion. It lets reality catch up to a lie that has lasted too long. My father told her she was no longer welcome to mock, belittle, or speak about my service in this house again. If she couldn't respect that boundary, she wouldn't be invited back until she learned how. My mother didn't soften it. She agreed, and the fact that she agreed without cushioning it stunned my sister more than anything else that night. And my sister, who had spent the entire evening acting like I was the fragile one, suddenly looked like a person discovering what fragility actually feels like when admiration evaporates in real time. She turned to me then, not to apologize yet, not sincerely, but to ask in a shaking voice whether I had wanted this. I answered with the cleanest truth I had in me. No, I wanted a sister. This is just what was left after you kept choosing contempt. There are sentences that end arguments, and there are sentences that end illusions. That one ended both. After that, even the room seemed to understand there was no path back to the old version of us. The roles had broken. The stories she had told about me for years had broken with them. And for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer the one carrying the weight of keeping everything from falling apart. She did apologize eventually, but not in the neat cinematic way people imagine when they think of closure. There was no perfect speech, no instant redemption, no tearful reconciliation that made the years of contempt feel suddenly meaningful. What happened was more human and, in some ways, more brutal. After the former operator walked out and my father told her to leave for the night, she stood in the middle of that dining room looking stripped of every shield she had relied on: wit, charm, social confidence, superiority. even her posture had changed. She was no longer leaning into the room like it existed to reflect her. She looked unsteady, like someone trying to remain upright after an impact she had not seen coming. She opened her mouth twice before words came out. When they finally did, they were small. She said my name the way people do when they are trying to reach someone after spending too long proving they never really saw them. She said she hadn't understood. I told her understanding was never the issue. Respect was. She said she was sorry for the jokes. I told her they were never jokes to me. They were rehearsed humiliations dressed up as humor, and everybody in that house had let them pass for too long. She said she thought I acted secretive because I liked feeling above everyone. I said secrecy was part of the oath, while mockery had always been her own choice. She started crying harder then, and for the first time in our lives, nobody rushed to comfort her. My mother remained seated. My father said nothing. The absence of rescue was its own verdict. No one handed her tissues. No one crossed the room to say she didn't mean it. No one softened the edges of what had just happened for her benefit. That was the real cost she paid that night. Not just embarrassment, not just a shattered image, but the sudden discovery that the family had stopped arranging itself around her ego. The center of gravity had moved. It was never going back. She asked whether I could forgive her. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told her forgiveness without change is just permission with softer language, and I was done offering that. I said if she wanted any relationship with me in the future, it would begin with truth. No more minimizing my service, no more mocking what she doesn't understand, and no more turning me into a performance for other people. She nodded like someone hearing terms from a world she should have entered years earlier. Then she asked the one question that confirmed how deeply the night had cut her. Did everyone really think that badly of me? My father answered before I could. No, we thought too well of you for too long. Silence followed that, deep, final, almost holy in the way hard truth sometimes feels when it has nowhere left to hide. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't just answer a question, it rewrites a person's understanding of themselves. She looked at him like she had expected one last opening, one last rescue. It never came. She left the house without slamming the door. That detail matters to me. Her exits had always been loud before, designed to make her the victim of every room she damaged. That night she left quietly because for the first time, drama could not save her. After she was gone, my mother came to me and held my face in both hands like she was trying to memorize who I really was, ashamed of how long she had accepted a smaller version of me because it was easier. My father apologized too, not only for the dinner, but for every year he had looked down instead of speaking up. I accepted that more easily than I expected, maybe because accountability from him felt real. As for me, I went outside alone for a few minutes and stood in the dark, breathing in air that felt sharper and cleaner than the air inside. I thought about all the years I had let her define the terms of our relationship, all the times I had made myself smaller to keep peace that was never truly peaceful, all the missions I could never discuss, all the names I would never say, all the lives that moved forward because someone like me had noticed what others didn't. And I realized something that changed me more than her apology ever could. I no longer needed my sister to validate what I was. She had already paid the price for refusing to see it. She lost the moral high ground she pretended to own. She lost the easy admiration she collected from people who only knew her in fragments. She lost the friend whose respect she valued most. And inside this family, she lost the privilege of insulting me without consequence. More than that, she lost control of the story. She would never again be able to frame me as the overly serious sister who couldn't take a joke. That version died in that dining room. Sometimes revenge is not screaming. It is not public destruction for spectacle. Sometimes revenge is far more devastating. The truth walks into the room, stands beside you, and refuses to leave until the person who mocked you is forced to face exactly who you were all along. My sister thought my badge was meaningless. By the end of the night, it had frozen the only witness she wanted on her side, exposed the lie she had told about me for years, and shattered the version of herself she used to hide behind. I didn't need to ruin her. I only had to stop protecting her from reality. And when I finally did, she learned what I had known for a long time. Some soldiers fight where everyone can see them. Others fight in silence, in shadows, in rooms full of data and pressure and decisions that never make it to family dinner conversation. But when the truth finally surfaces, the people who mocked that service don't get the last word. They get the consequence. And that night, my sister did. The team behind Revenge Argon is committed to creating meaningful and engaging stories that entertain while also sharing thoughtful lessons. We want to make it clear that this is a fictional story, created to deliver educational messages and valuable life insights to our viewers. Megan handled the situation with strength, restraint, and dignity, choosing truth over chaos and self-respect over anger. Instead of losing control, she let the truth speak for itself, which made her response even more powerful. If you were in Megan's place, how would you handle a sister like that? And would you choose silence, confrontation, or something in between?